All right. Good evening, everyone. Let's begin. So we are continuing Eretz Hashem tonight in our journeys in Megillas Rus. There are source sheets. Miri, you know what? Maybe we just put some by the video. So thank you. So we are continuing tonight in Eretz Hashem in Megillas Rus. So the truth is, I want to frame our expectations in the right way. It would be wonderful just to be able to go through the entire Megillah from beginning to end and really analyze every pasuk and every parak. So because we're a little bit more limited in time, I mean, we could continue this post-Shavuos also, Mirat Hashem, but I think the goal was to make this a pre-Shavuos series. So what I'd like to try to do is kind of identify what we'll call, some of the major pivotal events that unfold in the Megillah that really help to shape the entire dynamic of the story. So in our last year, we were hyper-focused on who is Rus, who is this person? What motivates a person to behave this way? We got into the concept of the power of the ger. Who is the convert? So I'd like to now focus on another major event that occurs at the end of Parak Aleph, the beginning of Parak Beis. Chapter 1 going into chapter 2. So let's begin with number 1. So let me give you a little bit of context. So the context over here, again, remember, is as we know, that Rus and Arpa lose their husbands. Machlon and Kilyon, the two sons of Rus, die. Rus and Arpa are widowed, and they begin to both make the journey back with Rus to Canaan. It's very important to understand that as much as Rus is the heroine of the story, but remember, Arpa accompanied Rus as well, and it's also important to understand that Arpa would have gone the whole way with Naomi had Naomi not dissuaded her. Remember again, it's Naomi who is persistent in saying, don't come back with me. I have nothing to offer you. So again, Rus is more persistent, so she stays and Arpa goes back. So now, number 1 picks up after that. So now it's just Rus and Naomi traveling back to Canaan. So what happens? So they both come back to Beis Lechem. Now remember again, we know from the beginning of the Megillah what's significant about Beis Lechem. So Beis Lechem was the home of Rus. Remember again, Beis Lechem, Bethlehem, was the home of Jewish nobility during this time in history. So as such, again, Naomi, as much as now she's a widow, she's lost her husband, she lost her 2 sons, we're going to see she lost her wealth, she lost everything, but she's going back home to the place that she knows. So what happens? She comes into Beis Lechem, Vatehom kol ha'ir alei vata'omer hazos Naomi. And everybody, there's like an uproar. There's an uproar. Vatem actually really doesn't mean an uproar. Meanwhile, the entire city was astir. Astir. In other words, people were talking. And what were they saying? Is this Naomi? Vatomer alein al tigrani Naomi krona li mara. Don't call me Naomi. Remember again, Naomi is from the notion of Naim, of pleasant. Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. Call me bitter. Why? Ki himar shakai li ma'od. Because Hashem has dealt very bitterly with me. Ani malaya halachti v'reikam heshivani Hashem lama tekrena ni Naomi v'Hashem anabi uv'shada heirai li. So again, Naomi says, don't call me Naomi. I left Canaan full, right? I left Canaan with so much bracha. I left Canaan with so much good, with so much beauty. And now I'm coming back to Canaan totally and fundamentally empty-handed. So by the way, this is like one of those conversations where you ask someone how they're doing, right? And they tell you every single thing that's wrong in their life and that's ever been wrong in their life. And generally, again, what happens after you have one of those interactions, right? Note to self, don't engage this person anymore, right? I'm gonna just wave from a distance next time. So just understand the profundity of this, right? That again, Naomi comes back. People are like, wow, is that Naomi? And Naomi again, she could have said, what could she have said? Yes, right? Yeah, it's me. I'm back. Been a rough couple of years, but I'm back. But instead again, she launches into this entire soliloquy, really highlighting just the pain that she's bearing and the difficulty of her circumstances. So obviously, also in general in life, when you see a situation like this, right, and you ask someone how they're doing, and they unload everything, that often shows also that the pain that they're bearing is very much by the surface, right? We all carry pain in life in different ways. So a lot of times in life we try to push down the pain, try to suppress the pain. I don't mean in an unhealthy way, but you also can't always wear your pain on the surface. But sometimes the pain is so acute, and sometimes the pain is so overwhelming that you can't push it down. That it just stays so close to the top, to like almost like to my consciousness. So you see that Naomi clearly is so pained that all it takes is that a Naomi, and right after that one question, everything comes pouring out. V'atashav nami Rus ha'Moavia kalasi ma Hashem mistei Moav v'heim bo beis lechem b'tchilas kitzir chitim. So okay, so this is what we'll call like part 2 of the story. The return. I'm sorry.
Sorim, not Hittim.
Sorim.
You said Hittim.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you. Right. So ultimately, again, they come back in the beginning of the harvest season. They come back at the beginning of the harvest season. So now Rus and Naomi are back in Eretz Canaan. So the Gemara is intrigued by this, right? Because what it sounds like is, right, the image is Rus and Naomi come back, and for some reason everyone is gathered. Everyone is gathered. So I don't understand why is everyone gathered? Everyone's just waiting for them to return. What is it that everyone is gathered and sees a return? So the Yerushalmi says in number 2 something amazing. Ksiv v'atem kol ha'ir aleim ve'efshar kol karta misbala begin Naomi ali lufta. I don't understand. No one in Beis Lechem has anything better to do than to watch who's coming back. What is this? People just sitting on their porch watching who's coming through town? What's going on over here? This is incredible. Ela ishto shel Boaz meisa ba'osa hayom. Rather, again, the Yerushalmi says something amazing. A major event occurred that day. Boaz's wife passed away. Boaz's wife passed away, and what happened? So the Gemara says, Ad kol ama gama chasada nichnas Rus nami v'nimtzeis zu yotzeis v'zu nichnesa. So something amazing happens, says the Yerushalmi. Why was everyone gathered? Everyone was gathered because they were gathered together for a levaya, for a funeral. Whose funeral? Boaz's wife. Boaz's wife. So just understand the profound confluence of events, and this is a theme we're going to develop a little bit more, right? So as everyone is literally gathered for the levaya of Boaz's wife, remember Boaz was like one of the Gedolei Hadar, one of the great sages of the generation, one of the great leaders of the generation. So obviously, again, everyone is out for his wife's levaya, and literally as everyone is gathered for the funeral of Mrs. Boaz, who comes in? Who comes in? Rus. I don't want to ruin the end of the story for you, right? But again, it's one of these dramatic details. You know, there's a concept. The Gemara says, actually, again, Shlomo Melech says it in Mishlei, Dar holeches v'dar ba va'olam li'olam amades. Right? Generations come and generations go, but the world always stands. The way that Ribono Shel Olam runs the world is that before he removes something that is necessary, he has already created the replacement for that very thing. Now, we may not be aware of that replacement, but again, for example, the Gemara talks about this in the realm of leadership, right? That before HaKadosh Baruch Hu took Moshe Rabbeinu, before Moshe Rabbeinu left this world, there was a Yoshua. And that's serious. But Yoshua wasn't as great as Moshe. That's okay. That's okay. The point is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu never leaves a void, and he never leaves a vacuum. The moment that something is removed, already the process to fill that emptiness, to fill that void, has already begun. So it's dramatic to see. Everybody is gathered for the levaya of Boaz's wife, and literally, as they're gathered for the funeral, Rus, who no one knows, remember, no one knows her, but Rus is entering right into the community of Beis Lechem. So incredible. So skip that. So go to number 3. Now, of course, unbeknownst to everyone, so leaving aside Rus right now, Naomi is related to Boaz. They're mishpacha. V'atomer Rus ha'Moavia Naomi el chana hasada ve'alakta b'shibolim achar asher imsachin be'inav v'atomer la l'chi biti. So what happens? So remember again, this references back to last year. So it's interesting, right? So everyone knows that Naomi is back, right? Everyone knows that she's back. Yet what happens over here? What does the Megillah say? The Megillah says they have nothing to eat in the house. They have no food. They're poor, they're destitute. So what happens? So Rus says to Naomi, let me go out and collect the gleanings from the fields. Remember again, part of Jewish agricultural law is that we have certain tithes that we are supposed to leave for the poor. So there is leket, shichacha, and peah. So remember again, peah, you have to leave a corner of your field unharvested, leave it for the poor. Leket, you drop stalks, you have to leave them for the poor. Peah, you leave behind a bundle, you have to leave that for the poor as well. So Rus says to Naomi, let me go out and glean in the fields. So first of all, just to understand something dramatic over here. The fact that they have to say this, the fact that Rus has to go and glean in the fields, what does that show you? No one was reaching out to them. So this is pretty dramatic. So you could have said, well, maybe no one knew they were back. You can't say that because you saw in source number 1, everyone knew that they were back. Everyone knew that they were back. But yet, no one reached out. Why would no one reach out to Naomi? So remember again, based on last year, the answer is somewhat understandable. Maybe not justifiable, but understandable. Why did no one reach out? Because at the end of the day, they felt abandoned by Naomi and her husband Elimelech. They felt abandoned. Remember again, Naomi and her husband were pillars of the community. Remember again, I don't think we actually discussed this inside, but one of the reasons they left, why would they leave in the middle of regional famine? There was famine. Vayirav ba'aretz, they left. The Malbim brings down they left because they wanted to preserve their wealth. They understood that had they remained in Canaan, somebody would have been constantly knocking on the door for tzedakah. They would have depleted their personal wealth. So they made a conscious decision. Let's relocate to Moab, preserve our wealth, and not have to help our fellow Jew. Well, sometimes what goes around comes around, for better or for worse. So now Naomi comes back. She has no husband. She has no sons. She has nothing. No one reaches out. No, by the way, even Boaz, who's relative, no one reaches out. Naomi is a pariah, right? She's totally marginalized in the community. I just want to point out just how dramatic this is also. There are many lessons from Megillas Rus, but so often in life, the people who are marginalized and peripheralized have so much to give and so much to contribute. All you have to do is a little bit of outreach. All you have to do is extend your hand. No one reaches out to Rus. No one reaches out to Naomi. And meanwhile, they don't even realize that this is the mother of the Messianic line. But yet no one even brought over an Erev Shabbos package. No one even said a Shalom Aleichem. I don't know, bring a bottle of Moscato and a box of chocolates. Nothing. No one ever reaches out. And part of this is our charge also. One of the great challenges, one of the most beautiful things about Klal Yisrael is you have tremendous achdus, but sometimes the weakness of Klal Yisrael is we forget about people who kind of live on the periphery. We forget about people who maybe aren't the loudest, who aren't the most popular, who aren't the most successful. The people are maybe a little bit different, who kind of live on the edges of society, of community. And so often, they're just ignored. Not even purposely, not even intentionally, it just happens. We had this when we left Mitzrayim, when Amalek attacked us. Remember again, where does Amalek attack us from? Vayizanev b'cha kol hanechashalim acharecha. They attacked the stragglers who were behind. Ever wonder to yourself, why were there stragglers? How could it be that as a people, we let people straggle behind? How could that be as a collective, as a cohesive nation? How could it be that there are people who couldn't keep up and no one looked out for them in almost every single story, right? Because we're a people, and as a people, we don't do everything correctly, and almost by default, there's always someone left behind. One of the most important things, what does it mean to be part of community? What it means to be part of community is not to hang out with your friends. I mean, you should hang out with your friends, that's fantastic. But that's just having friends. What it means to be part of community is dafka, to be attentive and to look out for those who may not be in the in crowd, for those who may be living on the periphery, in the shoulder, on the margins. And dafka, to go out of your way to enfranchise those individuals. That's who should be at your Shabbos table. That's who should be receiving your shalach manas. That's who should be getting a phone call before a Shabbos. And again, there are these lessons here. How could it be that Naomi is back and no one even lifts a finger? No one does anything. So Rus says, look, no one's helping us. And Rus, here's what's interesting. Naomi, what does Naomi do about this? What does Naomi do about this situation? What does she do? Naomi does nothing. I just want to point out, if you look at the psukim, right? Naomi does nothing. It's Vatome Rus HaMoaviyah El Naomi El Chana Hasada Valakta. So Naomi does nothing. So Naomi, what are you going to eat? What are you going to eat? And what's the answer? What is Naomi going to eat? What is she going to eat? Nothing, because Naomi has given up on life. So remember again, if Naomi just dies in the house, so she'll die in the house. Just here's what you should know. Once you change your name to Mara, it's pretty much downhill from there, right? In other words, if that's how you're identifying the entirety of your life experience, that life is one big piece of Mara. That's what it is. There's nothing good. There's nothing happy. There's nothing pleasant. Everything is Mara. So pretty much what you do is you sit in the house, you close the shades, and you wait to die. So if you ask Naomi, what's your plan? There's no plan. I will just sit here until the Ribono Shel Olam takes me. Now what's incredible is that Rus, what does Rus say? I'll go out and glean. I'll go out and glean. So one of the things we're going to see, what's incredible about Rus, is a sense of optimism. And almost like, sometimes, let me take a step back. One of the most beautiful thing about children, right? What's the most beautiful thing about children? And now the age of this beauty is getting lower and lower and lower. But what's the most beautiful thing about children? Is in their complete innocence, everything is beautiful in the world. Everything is great. Everything is happy. Everything is good, right? And sometimes one of the most beautiful things about being around children is that could restore a little bit of your optimism and joy and hope, and maybe take away a little bit of the cynicism and the sarcasm. So Rus is almost like a child, right? She's just joined the fold of Klal Yisrael, right? She's now in Canaan. This is great. She's in Beis Lechem. This is fantastic, right? Kever Rachel's not too far. This is incredible. So for her, she's like, all right, we have no food, so whatever. I'll go glean. And you Jewish people, you're incredible. You have a whole system for this, right? All you need to do is show up at a field. No reservation, no table for two, no this. Just show up wherever you want, wherever there's a field. Every single Jewish farmer has an obligation to go ahead and leave for the poor. And if you're Rus, you're like, wow, this is incredible. Granted, life is a bit difficult, but how incredible is this that we have support? So two dramatically different ways to view the situation. Okay, so what happens? Number 4. So Rus goes out. Now, where is Rus going? Where is Rus going? Where is Rus going? Remember, Rus is not going to Boaz, because as far as Rus knows, Rus doesn't know Boaz. Right? Remember, the Megillah is telling us that Boaz is related to Naomi, but that's like the narrator. Remember again, who wrote Megillas Rus? It was Shmuel Hanavi. So the narrator, Shmuel Hanavi, is giving us like stories, giving narration information. So by the way, just kind of setting us up, you know that Naomi has a very powerful relative by the name of Boaz. But Rus doesn't know Boaz from Adam. She doesn't know anyone. So where is she going? To the first available field. The first field that I see that has produce, that's where I'm going to go. So what happens? But what occurs? So the Gemara says, Vayikar mikra, something occurred. Something amazing happened, says the Megillah. What happened? Vayikar mikra. Now, literally, Vayikar mikra means, the English translation over here, chance was to come. In other words, Vayikar mikra means something kind of like just happened. Like mikra is something just occurred, almost like by itself. And what occurred by itself? The first field that she happens to go to was the field of Boaz. And by the way, that's a pretty astounding thing. She has no idea who Boaz is, right? Boaz has no idea. I would assume Boaz has no idea who she is. We'll see that from in just a little bit. But Lamaisa, again, even without all of this knowledge, the first field she comes upon is the field of Boaz. Now, the Malbim in number 5, I'll take this outside. The Malbim number 5 says, what do you mean, Vayikar Mikra? Come on. There's no such thing as coincidence, right? There's no such thing as happenstance. So the Malbim says something amazing. He says, this is actually reminiscent of another story. What's the other story? Back to Parshas Chayei Sarah. Avram sends Eliezer to go find a wife for Yitzchak. So remember again, Eliezer he devises a plan. What's the plan? I'm going to come with all of my camels. I'm going to stand by the well, right? The well was like the biblical place to meet people, right? I'm going to go to the well. I'm going to ask a girl for a drink. If she goes ahead and she offers me something to drink and also offers to give all of my camels to drink, she is the girl. She's the chosen one. So if you're Eliezer, okay, by the way, great plan. If you're Eliezer, what are you getting ready for? The Pashtus, a long wait. This is a big thing. To find a girl, you're going to ask her for a drink. So first of all, again, a strange man asks you for a drink. Okay, that's a little bit strange by itself. But then again, you're going to say, sure, and also let me water your entire, I don't know what you call it, a flock, a herd of camels, whatever it is, your chevra of camels. I'm going to give them that. I mean, what is the probability of, he was confident he'll find someone like that. But it's going, so if you're Eliezer, you're like, all right, I better get comfortable by the well. It's going to be a long haul. First girl who comes out was Rivka. The Malbim says something amazing. He says, the Ribono Shel Olam is patient, except when he's not. Meaning what? That sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs things to happen, and he needs them to happen now. And so what he does at times is he expedites the natural order of things. So in reality, Eliezer should have had to wait a long time. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu needed to fill the void left by Sarah Imenu. So he expedites, he fast tracks. Same thing over here. What was the probability that Rus was going to stumble upon Boaz's field, the first field she comes to? Very low probability. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu needed things to happen. So what did he do? He expedites the process. And by the way, we see this in our own lives. Right? There are things that we want, the things that we work on, and they take an incredibly long time. And then there are other things that just like drop into place 1, 2, 3. Sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs me to go on the prolonged journey, and other times HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually wants to expedite the normal course of events. So Vayikar Mikra means HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Kiviyachol very impatient to begin the Davidic line. So what does he do? First field that Rus comes to is the field of Boaz. Okay, so take a look. Number 6. Boaz by Beis Lachem. So Boaz comes. So again, it's just to paint the image. So right. So Rus is in the field and Rus is gleaning. She's doing her thing. No, I don't know if anyone knows her. She certainly doesn't know anyone. So she's just gleaning. How do you glean? You walk into a field. You pick up. You go to the corner that's left. You pick up the stalks. You pick up the bundles. And Shalom Yisrael. As she's gleaning. So again, another incredible event. Who happens to come in? Who comes home right in that moment? Boaz. Boaz comes in. Vayomer lekotzrim Hashem. Acham yomer lo yivracha Hashem. Vayar Boaz l'na'ara nitzav lekotzrim lemi hana'ara hazos. Boaz sees Rus and he says, "Who is that? Who is that?" Vayan hanar hanitzav lekotzrim vayomer na'ara moaviyahi hashava im Naomi mistei Moab. Oh, that girl. She is the Moabite girl. She's the girl from Moab who came back with Naomi from Moab. Now, the Gemara is intrigued by this in number 7. The Gemara says in Masechah Shabbos, "Vayomer Boaz l'na'ara nitzav ala kotzrim l'nemi ha'na'ara hazos v'chidarko shel Boaz lishol benara." So the Gemara is like a little bit surprised. Boaz, we're going to see like there was a pretty significant age difference between Boaz and Rus. So the Gemara like is surprised. Boaz is asking about who this young woman is. I don't know. It just seems a little strange, and it seems a little bit out of character. So the Gemara is intrigued by this. Why is, and again, just first thing he walks into the field, who's that girl? Lemia na'ara azos. Who is she associated? Who is she? Someone says, "V'chidarko shel Boaz, Boaz. You're a chash of a guy. You're a talmid chacham. You're a gadol hadar, right? A recent widower. You know what? It's just an interesting, not a bad, just an interesting question that he would be asking. So what's unfolding over here? So the Gemara itself gives its answer. The Gemara says, actually, before we get to the Gemara's answer, take a look at number 8. The Gra says something amazing. And this is actually pretty incredible. The Gra has a tremendous chiddush over here. The Gra says that someone had already suggested Rus as a shidduch to Boaz. Somebody already suggested it to Boaz. Right now, remember again, it's not far-fetched, right? Why is it not far-fetched? They're family. And we're going to see that there was a concept, a kind of like what we'll call like an extension of the Yibum idea. Yibum, remember again, means when a man dies without children. So there is a mitzvah for his brother, for the brother of the deceased, to marry his sister-in-law, to marry the widow. Very interesting halacha, because normally that relationship, brother-in-law and sister-in-law, is prohibited, but yet in a situation of Yibum, it's a mitzvah. So there was an extension of the concept of Yibum that when someone died without children, the closest surviving relative would go ahead and marry that person. We'll get into that in Meretz Hashem next week, share a little bit more. So apparently, the Gra says, someone has suggested Rus for Boaz. Rus for Boaz. So now what happens? So Boaz now comes to his field. Sure enough, he says, who is that? They say, oh, that's Rus. So if you look at number 8 in the left-hand column, he says, L'mian arazos, Ratzalomar, im kedivrechem shiogenesli, im kein lemihi, ulemi mishpachta. So either he recognized her, he recognized the name. So according to the Gra, he's inquiring why, because someone had already suggested her as a shidduch to him. Okay, so that's the Gra. If you go back up to number 7 for just a moment, so the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, so the Gemara says, look at the second line of number 7. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Davar Chachma Ra'aba. Boaz came to the field, and he saw that she acted with wisdom. How did she act with wisdom? Shnei shibalin lakta, shlosha shibalin eina lakta. Ultimately, again, what happens? Now, there are different halachas when it comes to gleaning. So amongst those halachas that come up is the concept that, for example, with leket. Leket means I'm going ahead and harvesting my field, and I go ahead and I leave behind, I drop a stalk or two. So what's the halacha? If it's 1 stalk or it's 2 stalks, then the halacha is you leave it. If it's 3 stalks, then the halacha is you are allowed to pick it up. So what must have happened often is the poor weren't necessarily so vigilant with this. So what would happen? They'd see stuff on the ground, the owner's not there, and they would take it. They would take it, not maliciously, just you're not necessarily thinking about this. Boaz noticed that Rus only took wheat that was left behind with 1 stalk or 2 stalks, and never a group of 3. She was makbid on the halacha. The other passage the Gemara says is in Masnisa Tana Davar Tznius Ra'aba. He saw within her incredible modesty. Omdos mu'umad, noflos miyushav. The stalks that were standing, which must have been like from the corner, she took standing up while she was standing up, but stuff that was in the ground, she crouched down in a more modest fashion. So the point that the Gemara is making over here is that what caught Boaz's eye was the chachma, was the wisdom, or the premeditation with which she approached the process of gleaning. The Gra, look at number 9, the Gra highlights this again, and the Gra says something amazing. This is incredible. He says, Ratzalomar, Shaholcha Tchila Kol Asada Lo Lakta. This is incredible. So if you could imagine, by the way, right, how would a person glean a field, right? So a field has rows of wheat, or rows of produce. So now, what you could do is you could walk down, gather, but then you have to walk back holding everything. So he saw Rus did something interesting. Rus first walked to the far end of the field. Then, on her way back, she gathered the gleanings. What did that do? So as opposed to walking down, holding, and then having to schlep everything back, she only had to collect it on the way back, minimizing the amount of tircha, the amount of effort she had to put in. So he writes over here, Shaholcha tchila kol asada lalokta, ki lama laleilech imasui halicha v'chazora. Why should she hold the wheat going backwards and forwards? V'achakach, kisha chazra, as his chila laket misof hasada. And then ultimately, again, after she got to the far end of the field, then walking back, what we'll call it, toward the entrance, that's when she would gather up all of the gleaning. And ultimately, again, so incredible idea. So you see a common theme over here. What caught Boaz's eye? What caught his eye? What caught his eye, according to the Gemara, according to the Gra, was that Rus acted with chachma. That he saw just from the way that she was conducting herself, from what she took and what she didn't take, from how she actually, like her physical posture during the actual collection, the forethought in the most efficient way to collect. Boaz sees her, and what he sees is a young woman who's incredibly well thought out, who's incredibly premeditated, who doesn't live life, so to speak, by the seat of her pants, but goes ahead and there's a chachma. There's just a forethought in everything. Nothing just happens. Everything is premeditated. Now, I'll show you something amazing. If you take a look at number 10, we're going to skip a couple of generations now. So now we come to Tehillim, right? Rus's grandson, great-great-grandson, right? So what does David HaMelech write into him? David HaMelech writes in Kapitel Tes Vav, chapter 15, Mizmor LeDavid, mi agor bi alecha mi yishkom b'har kodshecha. So David HaMelech says, Mizmor LeDavid, Hashem, Who will dwell in your tent? Who will reside on your holy mountain? So what David Melech is asking over here is, who is a person? Remember, this concept of dwelling in the tent of God, residing on the mountain of God, what does this represent? This represents a person who has a close relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam. What kind of person has a close relationship with God? Right? By the way, isn't this the $1 million question? I want a close relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How do I get it? How do I achieve it? And David HaMelech says, Holech Tamim, one who walks with complete simplicity. And what that means is just a sense of emunah. Sense of emunah. I place my complete faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that He has my back, that He is choreographing my life, that He is orchestrating everything that unfolds around me, and I put my full trust in Him. But then David HaMelech says, Upoel Tzedek. Poel Tzedek. Now the literal translation over here is works in righteousness. Works in righteousness. Okay. What does that mean? Works in Poel Tzedek. So look at number 11. The Gemara Maseches Makah says, Poel Tzedek kegon alba chilkiya. Like Abba Chilkiya. Okay, not very helpful to us immediately, right? Who's Abba Chilkiya? So take a look at number 12. An amazing Gemara Maseches Taanis. This is an incredible Gemara. So the Gemara says, Abba Chilkiya bar berei dechoni hama'agel hava. Abba Chilkiya was the grandson of Choni Hama'agel. Now, everyone knows the story of Choni Hama'agel, right? Choni, the circle drawer. Remember, again, he was the guy who, when there was terrible drought, Klal Yisrael, they came to him, asked him to daven, and Choni went ahead and literally drew a circle, and he said, Ribono Shel Olam, I am not leaving this circle until you bring rain. Now, in general, don't try that at home, right? Don't issue ultimatums to God. It's a very bad idea generally. It works for some people, doesn't work for most, and it's just a bad approach to one's relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Choni felt that he had a right to issue an ultimatum because he was coming out on his behalf on behalf of Klal Yisrael. Choni Hama'agel was known for his koach hatfilah, his power of prayer. Well, his grandson, Abba Chilkiah, apparently was also known for that same power of prayer. So the Gemara tells a story that one time there was a drought, and in the Beis Medrash they dispatched two Talmidei Chachamim, two Torah scholars, to go to Abba Chilkiah to ask Abba Chilkiah to go and daven for rain. Okay, so let's pick up. So take a look at, I'm in source number 12, the third line in. Also, by the way, the English translation is on the next page as well. So the rabbis went to the house of Abba Chilkiah, but they couldn't find Abba Chilkiah. So they went onto the field, and they found that Abba Chilkiah was plowing the field. Abba Chilkiah was a day laborer. Now, this is not our topic, but I just want to point out to you that people think that working versus learning is an either or. Either you could be a Talmid Chacham and always be in the Beis Medrash, or you could go to work and settle for absolute spiritual mediocrity. It is blatantly false. It is blatantly false. Almost every single one of the great personalities in the Gemara had a job and had an occupation. And by the way, he's not a CEO. Abba Chilkiah is not running a hedge fund. I just want to point out of it, right? Abba Chilkiah is a laborer. He is tilling soil. He's a day laborer. By the way, I just want to point out also, you can't be a day laborer just like after morning Seder, right? Or just during afternoon. In other words, day laborer means you're showing up at sunrise and you're usually there until sunset. This is physical, manual labor. And yet this is the man whose tefillos bring rain to the world. So it's just important because sometimes in our contemporary society, we're so black and white, and especially again in the realm of shidduchim, sometimes we're so black and white. A good boy does this, right? Who made that up? And which great chacham, Rav or Rebbetzin, decided that a good boy looks like this, or the most ridiculous thing in the world? Yeshivas are filled with good boys who learn a lot, and yeshivas are also filled with a lot of boys who do absolutely nothing, right? And the workforce is filled with many people who waste a ton of time, and many people who count every single precious moment, so that when they're not working, they're learning, and when they're not learning, they're working. To put people in boxes is the greatest disservice you could do to individuals and you could do to a society. But I digress. Let's go back over here, right? Abba Chilkiah. Abechilkia. So Abechilkia goes ahead and he's a laborer, so they can't find him. So what happens? They go to the field. So they come. This is incredible. So what happened? So I just want to tell you this story because it's an incredible story. So they say, Abechilkia, Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem. And he doesn't respond. Okay? So he continues working. So these two rabbanim, these two tamich are just waiting there. They're just waiting there. He continues to work. Bepanya, Kevin Menaki Tzivi, Darat Tzivi Umara Bechad Kasve, Viglima Bechad Kaspa. So now Abechilkia is going home. Still hasn't said a word to these guys, right? On one shoulder he puts his cloak, on the other shoulder he puts wood and his axe or his shovel. Okay? Kula Archa Lo Sayim Asane. The whole way home, Abechilkia walked barefoot. When he got to the river, he had to cross the river to go home, he put on his shoes. When he was crossing through like thorn bushes, he lifted up his tunic, he lifted up his cloak. When he got back home to the city, it's beautiful. His wife came out to greet him, right? His wife came out to greet him, and she was all dressed up. She was all dressed up for him, all dressed up, beautified herself. When he came home, Abechilkia told his wife to go in first. He went behind her, and then the guests came in behind Abechilkia. Okay, so the story goes on a little bit. So finally, to make a long story short, Abechilkia davens, the rain comes. The rabbis say, okay, Abechilkia, thank you for the rain. Explain to us what happened today. Just explain to us what happened. This was the strangest day we've ever experienced. They said, Abechilkia, we saw you in the field. Why did you not say Shalom Aleichem to us? Abechilkia said, I'm a day laborer. And when I'm working, I'm on the job. And when I'm on the job, I try to be very honest with my employer. And therefore, again, there is no time for small talk. It's not right for me to engage in small talk when I'm on someone else's dime. Incredible. All right, next. Abechilkia, why is it that when you went home, you kept your axe and your wood on one shoulder and your cloak on the other shoulder? To which Abechilkia responded, I don't own the cloak. This is how poor he was. I don't own the cloak. The cloak is a borrowed cloak. I borrowed it to wear. I did not borrow it to use it as a cushion underneath the wood and the axe. Incredible. Abechilkia, why is it the whole way you walked barefoot? And the whole way you walked barefoot, and when you got to the river, suddenly again you put on your shoes. Very simple. On land, Abechilkia says, I can see exactly where I'm walking. I could avoid anything that would hurt me. But in the water, I can't see what's going on. I put on my shoes. Abechilkia, why is it that when you got to the thorn bushes, you lifted up your tunic, exposing your legs? Abechilkia says, very simple. If my legs get cut, they will heal. If my clothing is ripped, it will not. Abechilkia, why is it that when you came home, your wife greeted you all dressed up, all beautiful? He says, this way, I will not be tempted to look at other women. Abechilkia, I won't be tempted to look at other women. Abechilkia, why is it that when we went into the house, you had your wife go in first, then you and then us? And he says, because I don't know you guys. And therefore, it's going to be inappropriate for you to allow you to walk behind my wife. And the story goes on and on and on and on. So let's come full circle. David HaMelech says, who is the kind of person who is able to dwell in the tent of Hashem, who is able to live on the mountain of the Rebbe Hashem? What kind of person? So the David HaMelech says one of the major qualities, Poel Tzedek. To be a person who is, now literally translated, Poel Tzedek, Poel, means to act, right? Or to do things. Tzedek. Tzedek means with a sense of correctness or a sense of justice. The Gemara says, like who? Like Abechilkia. What is incredible, and by the way, you'll look at the whole story is here in English also. What is incredible about this story of Abechilkia? What's incredible? What's incredible?
It's all thought out.
It's all thought out. There is not one thing that Abechilkia does that is not premeditated. There is not one thing that Abechilkia says that is not measured. Everything he does has a svara, has a reason, has a logic, from how he conducts himself during his workday, to when he wears his shoes, to when he lifts up his tunic. And by the way, it's not just him. It's the household also. Abechilkia tells his wife, sometimes a man is a man, and people have their wants and their urges and their lusts and their desires. So again, let's work together. Let's work together to build a life of Kedusha, to build a home of Kedusha, a marriage of Kedusha. Everything that Abba Chilki, and by the way, there's more to the story, right? He goes in, he offers them, doesn't offer them bread, so there's a lot more. But the point is, David Melch says, if you want to live a life of Kedusha, you have to be thought out. You have to be premeditated. You can't live life by the seat of your pants. There has to be a plan, and the plan has to be a well-hatched plan. And therefore, again, if we come full circle, you ever wonder, one of the most incredible things we're going to see as you go through Megillas Rus, sometimes people say things, wise people say things, and you wonder to yourself, wow, where did they get that nugget of wisdom? So where does David HaMelech get this idea that one of the most important character traits, one of the most important things that a person could possess is being a poel tzedek, is being a thought out? Where does he get that from? And what's the answer? From the Alter Baba, from Rus. Because the truth is, the first thing we learn about Rus, right? The first thing she does in Canaan is she goes to the field to glean. But she doesn't just show up. And as one would imagine, and understandably so, the poor come to the field, right? If you were to think about what that scene looked like, right? The poor would come to the field. I don't know, I always imagine a little bit of chaos. Like a little bit of chaos, like a little bit of, kind of like a kosher supermarket on a Friday afternoon, right? But just times 10, right? That's what I would imagine it. They're poor, and there's a limited amount of gleanings, and everybody wants to get, and yet in the midst of all of this mayhem, in the midst of all of this chaos, there is an island of premeditated serenity. There is this one person who says, okay, I'll pick up one, I'll pick up two, no, but not three. And there's one person who's careful about how she picks up certain things. And instead of just grabbing everything that you can whenever you can, she walks to the far end of the field, makes her way back, and as she's going, she goes in and she collects. And Boaz is like, this is incredible. What kind of who is this? Who is this? In a world where people act so chaotically, and a world where people often act without thought, who is this person who is so well thought out, who is so premeditated, who does everything with a rhyme and a reason? Who is this Poel Tzedek? So it's incredible. The first real attribute that we learn about Rus is that she was an Abechilkiah. She was a Poel Tzedek. And amazingly enough, David HaMelech, generations later, when he's writing his own Sefer Tehillim, he writes again, Mizmor LaDavid, Mi Agor Be'alecha, Mi Yishkon Bahar Kadshecha. If you want closeness to God requires premeditated, well thought out, deliberate, and mindful living. And it makes perfect sense. Because what is the dominant quality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The dominant quality of God? Dominant quality? What would you say? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is premeditated. God is Haya Hove V'yiyeh, past, present, and future, all combined into one, which means there is nothing that happens in this universe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't orchestrate for a particular reason. In order to be close to God, you have to be like God. The Baal Tanya writes about this in the beginning of time, this concept that the closest way to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is divine emulation. V'halachta b'drachav. Whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu does, if you want to know what to do in life, look what God does. Whatever God does, that's what I should do. So the dominant quality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that he's premeditated. It's not their shot that God wakes up one morning, whatever that means. God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets, all right, you know what? I'm feeling spontaneous today. I don't know, let's do something. That's not the way it works by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There is no spontaneity. Again, spontaneity is good in measure by human beings, but there's no spontaneity by HaKadosh Baruch Hu because everything is premeditated. Everything has a place. Everything has a makom. Everything has an order. Everything has a seder. And so David HaMelech says, if you want to live a life of close proximity to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you want to dwell on the mountain, if you want to dwell in the tent of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Paul said, you got to be like God. You got to be premeditated. You have to be well thought out. You have to plan your life. And I think that this is such a tremendous lesson for us. I think on a variety of different levels. It could be everything as simple as to the need to plan out our days. I'm sure all of us, hopefully all of us, make a schedule for the day. One of the interesting things, a good exercise is, I don't know about you, but I make a schedule for the day, and 9.9 out of 10 times, that is never the schedule. It's never the schedule. What is interesting at the end of the day is to go back and to do what we'll call like a retrospective schedule. So, okay, here's how I wanted to plan my day. How did I actually use my day? And it's such an incredible lesson in living a life of mindfulness, of being present, of being aware. How am I spending my time? What am I using my life for? You know, the Piagetza writes about this. In B'nai Machshavatov, the Rebbe writes that it's so important to have a schedule. And he says, by the way, he says, he doesn't say you should spend all of your time learning. He says you should have fun in life. You should hang out with your friends. But he says, go ahead and decide how much time. How much time? You want to spend time with your friends? Good. What time does it start? And what time does it end? You want to eat dinner with your family? Fantastic. What time does it start? What time does it end? You're going to work? What time does it start? And what time does it end? Live a premeditated life. That's true just on a daily schedule. And if we condition ourselves to think that way, to be a Paul Tzedek, it's amazing how much more we can accomplish. But it's not just on a schedule level. It's on a life level. It's on a life level. So often, right, we are like ships, right? We're like boats on the ocean, right? And sometimes what ends up happening, you know, Sham Shalfar Hirsch brings down, he says, the Torah goes through great detail about the Teva, the ark. There was only one fascinating thing that was missing from the ark, and that was a rudder. There was no steering mechanism on the ark, right? Because that was the whole avoda of the Teva. Noach got in, closed the door, and he wasn't the captain of the ship. He wasn't steering. He was saying, Chash Baruch Hu, you take me where you need to take me. Now, sometimes that's good, but a lot of times it's not. And what often ends up happening in life is, you know, I get on my boat and like wherever the current goes, right? Whatever's pulling or pushing me, that's where I end up. And so one day you wake up in life and you're in a spot, and it could be a fine spot. I'm not talking about bad things, but like, this is not really where I wanted to be. This is not really what I wanted to do. This is not the life that I wanted. This is not the person I wanted to be. And you can keep filling in the blanks. It's not the career that I wanted. It's not the relationships that I wanted. A whole variety of different things. So how did I get here? I got here because I wasn't living life like a Poel Tzedek. I was just letting the current take me instead of being an Abechilkia, instead of being a Rus, and deciding where I want to go and making a plan about how I want to get there. Now again, to be clear, we all know, you can make the best of plans. It doesn't mean that they're going to materialize. But one thing is clear, which is if you don't make a plan, it's for sure not going to materialize. If you make a plan, it still may not, but there's a greater statistical probability of getting what you want out of life with a plan than getting what you want out of life without a plan. And that's what the Megillah is teaching us. You see, Shmuel Hanavi, in this beautiful Megillah, is giving us so many tremendous life lessons all along the way. The first introduction to Rus. What makes a Rus a Rus? What are the dominant features of greatness? So this Megillah doesn't say it explicitly, but David HaMelech tells us explicitly in Kapitel Tesvav in chapter 15 in Tehillim. He tells us what makes great people great, what allows people to dwell in the tent, to dwell on the mountain. Poel Tzedek, Abechilkia. Live a premeditated life. Decide how you want to spend your day. Decide how you want to spend your life. Of course, sometimes you have to pivot, and sometimes you have to go in different directions, but make the plan. Be the Poel Tzedek, be the Abechilkia, be the Rus. Because when you live life with cognition, with mindfulness, with premeditation, that is where true success comes. That's where true greatness comes. And not just in the moments you're making your decisions, but they plot you on a course. Can you imagine, had Rus, just for argument's sake, had Rus been chaotic, been chaotic like everyone else, what would have happened, or what wouldn't have happened? She wouldn't have been noticed by Boaz. And had she not been noticed by Boaz, right? Because there's a whole chain reaction that comes about of it. Remember, again, we're not doing it tonight, but remember the next step in this story is she's noticed by Boaz. Boaz goes over to her, says, we're mishpacha. By the way, don't glean anywhere else. Everything you need is here. So suddenly again, she has food security. Suddenly again, she has support, right? And again, of course, it leads ultimately to marriage down the road. Why? Because she wasn't chaotic like everyone else. Because of that mindfulness, because of that premeditation, because of that Abechilkia personality, again, it's set in motion a whole series of events. What is true for us, what is true for Abba Chilkiah, is certainly true for us. If we could inculcate these same qualities within us and within our lives, then there is truly no telling what we could accomplish. All right, we'll stop over here for tonight. In Meretz Hashem, we will continue next week. We're going to go from Parak Beis in Meretz Hashem to Parak Gimel. And Shkoyach, everyone.